She laughed when she said it. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." It was just a joke, thrown at a stranger by the side of the road. But what she didn't know was that the quiet mechanic standing there was about to change her life forever. This isn't just a story about fixing a car. It's about how one unbelievable moment brought together two people from completely different worlds and ended in the most unexpected way. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." Vanessa Sterling's voice rang through the quiet countryside road, like a crystal bell. She had one hand on her hip, the other holding her designer sunglasses against the blazing summer sun. Her lips curled into an amused smile as she said it, not because she meant it, but because it was the most ridiculous thing she could imagine at that moment. Her sports car, a limited edition European import worth more than some people's houses, had died in the middle of nowhere. The engine had coughed, wheezed, and finally sputtered into silence. And to make matters worse, her phone had no signal. For a woman who spent her days in glass skyscrapers and business-class flights, this was a nightmare. She had already tried 3 repair shops in the city over the past week. All had told her the same thing: the engine's finished. Needs a rare part. Can't be fixed here. In other words, she was stranded until she could ship her beloved car overseas. And then, out of nowhere, a tall figure emerged from a small workshop just off the road. He was dressed in worn denim overalls, his dark skin gleaming with sweat, his strong hands still covered in grease from the car he'd been working on. He wasn't rushing toward her, just walking at his own pace, calm and steady, like nothing in the world could hurry him. "Car trouble?" he asked in a deep, even voice. Vanessa, slightly irritated and a little embarrassed, glanced him over. He wasn't the type she usually encountered. No flashy suit, no polished shoes. Just solid, real. "Yeah," she sighed, brushing her hair back. "The best mechanics in the city couldn't fix it. So unless you've got magic hands, it's a lost cause." The man's mouth quirked upward in the faintest hint of a smile. "Mind if I take a look?" She almost laughed. What's the harm? She thought. And then, as if to amuse herself, she blurted out the words that would change everything. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." It was a joke, just something to break the awkwardness. She expected him to laugh it off, but instead, he met her gaze, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to hold hers with an unspoken challenge. "All right," he said simply. "Let's see what she's got." Vanessa leaned against the side of her car, curious despite herself. She'd dealt with plenty of so-called experts in the past week, all of whom had poked and prodded under the hood before throwing up their hands. This man, Marcus Cole, as she would later learn, didn't waste time complaining about the difficulty. He popped the hood with practiced ease, peered inside, and began working with nothing more than a small toolbox and flashlight. Vanessa tilted her head. "You're not even wearing gloves." Marcus didn't look up. Gloves get in the way of feeling what's wrong. An engine tells you its secrets if you're willing to listen. She smirked. That sounded like something out of a movie. He only shrugged and kept working. His movements were precise. No fumbling, no wasted effort. It was almost hypnotic to watch. The countryside air was thick with the scent of oil and the hum of cicadas, but Marcus seemed locked into his own world. Minutes turned into an hour. Vanessa's initial amusement began to fade into genuine curiosity. She found herself wondering, could he actually pull this off? Finally, Marcus straightened, wiped his hands on an old rag, and nodded toward the driver's seat. "Try it now." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, but humored him. She slid behind the wheel, turned the key. Vroom. The sound that erupted was pure music. The low, powerful growl of her engine restored a perfect health. Vanessa's jaw dropped. She turned off the ignition, stepped out, and stared at him. "No. Way. How did you—" Marcus gave a modest shrug. Sometimes it's not about replacing parts. It's about understanding them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustle of the breeze and the faint purr of the car cooling down. Then Vanessa chuckled, shaking her head. "I can't believe it. 3 of the best shops in the city said it was impossible." "Impossible's just another word for nobody's tried hard enough," Marcus replied. She felt a strange flutter in her chest at those words. Not romantic, at least not yet, but respect, genuine admiration. Well, she said with a grin, I guess that means I owe you a marriage, huh? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. Not the polite smile of a stranger, but one that felt quietly confident. Guess you do. The next half hour passed in a blur. Vanessa insisted on paying him for his time, but he refused. You already promised me something else, he teased. She laughed again, shaking her head, but she didn't want to just leave it there. At least let me buy you a coffee, she offered. That coffee turned into a conversation that lasted hours. She learned that Marcus had been fixing engines since he was 12, taught by his father in a little garage. He didn't advertise, didn't run a flashy shop, but word of his skill had spread far. People drove for hours just to find him. He learned that she wasn't just some woman with a fancy car. Vanessa Sterling was the CEO of one of the country's top automotive companies, a business she had inherited but worked hard to expand. She knew numbers, strategy, and corporate deals, but she realized she didn't actually know as much about the heart of the machines her company sold. And sitting across from Marcus, she realized he did. When they finally parted ways that evening, Vanessa drove back to the city with more than just a repaired car. She carried the memory of a man who didn't care about titles, who solved the impossible without bragging, and who had, whether he realized it or not, accepted a challenge she'd meant as a joke. She didn't know it yet, but that laugh on the side of the road had set something in motion, something neither of them could stop. And before long, the words, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you," would no longer be a joke at all. The months that followed weren't perfect. They argued about time, about priorities, about the reality of balancing two completely different worlds. But every time the tension threatened to split them apart, they came back to the same thing, the promise to try. Vanessa learned how to change a flat tire without calling a driver. Marcus learned how to survive a gala dinner without making jokes about overpriced champagne. They met in the middle, sometimes literally, sharing weekends at the lake or quick lunches between meetings. One Saturday morning, almost a year to the day since the broken-down car had brought them together, Marcus called her. "Got something to show you," he said. When she arrived at the garage, the doors were closed, but she could hear the faint hum of an engine inside. Marcus swung them open with a grin. There it was, her car, the same one she'd joked she'd marry him over. Only now it didn't just purr, it sang. The body gleamed like it had rolled out of a dream, every detail polished, every imperfection smoothed away. "You rebuilt it?" she asked, stunned. "Not rebuilt," he said. "Restored. Better than new. I even found the original European part that was missing when you bought it. Took months to track down." She stepped forward, fingertips brushing the hood as if touching something alive. "Why?" she asked softly. Marcus shrugged, though his eyes gave him away. "Because when I fix something, I do it right. And because this car brought you to me, I figured it deserved some respect." Her throat tightened. It wasn't just a gesture. It was his way of saying, "I've been paying attention. I care enough to put in the work." 2 weeks later, they met in the same cafe where they'd shared their first real conversation. Marcus slid a small box across the table. Before she could open it, he said, "It's not a ring. Not yet. But I thought we could make that joke official someday." Inside was a small silver key, the ignition key to her newly restored car, engraved with 2 words, "Our Promise." Vanessa smiled, tears threatening. "You realize," she said, "if we ever do get married, this is going to be the strangest proposal story anyone's ever heard." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but it'll be ours." They didn't rush. Life still had deadlines, invoices, and days when they barely saw each other. But they kept showing up, piece by piece, like mechanics of the heart. And on a quiet spring morning, under a canopy of string lights in the courtyard of that same cafe, they finally said their vows. Marcus wore a simple suit. Vanessa wore a dress that shimmered like the paint on her favorite car. There were no limousines, no paparazzi, just friends, family, and a table full of pie. When the time came to leave, Marcus took her hand. "I think you should drive," he said. So she did, sliding into the driver's seat of the very car that had started it all. Marcus climbed in beside her, and as they pulled onto the open road, The car purred like a promise kept. They drove off into the golden light. Her laughter carried on the wind, and the hum of the engine steady as the love they had built. Proof that sometimes the heart isn't the only thing worth restoring. They kept seeing each other. At first it was small things. An exchange message to check in after a long day. A quick phone call when Vanessa's schedule finally let her breathe. Then it became lunch at the cafe. A weekend drive where Marcus taught her how to listen to an engine. And a slow, careful friendship that felt surprisingly natural. What started as a throwaway line by the roadside, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you," was suddenly the kind of private joke friends keep. But jokes can be dangerous when two people are paying attention. They can slip into something quieter and more serious before you even notice. One evening, a month after that first meeting, Vanessa found herself driving back to Marcus's garage without a plan. Her calendar had been full of investors and product launches. Her life had been measured in PowerPoints and profit margins. Tonight, she wanted none of that. She wanted simplicity. She wanted to talk to the man who fixed her impossible car and, apparently, her stubborn heart. When she arrived, the garage was bathed in golden lamplight. Marcus was under the hood of a battered pickup, the kind of vehicle that told a life story with its dents and patchwork paint. He looked up, surprised and pleased to see her. "You're back," he said. His voice had that same calm cadence that had made her feel safe from the chaos of the city. "I brought dinner," she said, holding out a paper bag. She'd stopped at the little bakery across town. Nothing fancy, but warm. She set the bag on the workbench and leaned in, watching him work. The way he moved, focused, unhurried, had become the quiet anchor of her recent days. They ate in the dim light, hands greasy and laughter easy. Conversation that night drifted from the mundane to the intimate. Marcus told a story about the first car he fixed with his father, a clunker that wouldn't run unless you bribed it with patience and oil. Vanessa spoke about the loneliness inside glass boardrooms, about people congratulating her achievements while never really asking how she was. "People expect me to be polished," she admitted, staring at the grease on her thumb. "They think wearing the suit means I'm made of steel. Half the time I'm terrified that I've got nothing beneath the clothes." Marcus looked at her without pity, only clear, kind understanding. "I fix things," he said simply, "not because I like the glory. Because something about making it right, putting the pieces back, it matters. Maybe to them, maybe to me, maybe to both." Those words settled in her like quiet truth. She began to see how his life had its own dignity. Long hours, a steady paycheck, neighbors who trusted him, people who called because they knew he'd show up. It was a life that didn't scream for attention, but built value quietly. She admired it. She feared it. And, unexpectedly, she wanted to be part of it. Their closeness grew in small, undeniable ways. He started dropping off handwritten notes when she returned a loaned wrench from his garage. "Nice driving yesterday. M." She, in turn, sent him a photo of a rare engine part she'd found in a catalog, not because she thought it was useful, but because she wanted to be part of the details he cared about. Yet every growing thing faces friction. For Vanessa, the pressure of two worlds tugged at her. Her board began to whisper when she missed evening calls. A magazine posted a gossipy headline about the CEO dating a local mechanic, and online commenters filled the thread with inside jokes and snide remarks. Her assistant warned her about optics. Her lawyer reminded her about perception. For Marcus, there were people too, old friends who joked, in ways that hurt, about how a woman with a name like Sterling wouldn't last long in a dusty garage. Neither of them wanted drama. They wanted life. But the world, especially one that loves a tidy narrative, was determined to complicate things. One afternoon, Vanessa walked into Marcus's garage to find him arguing with a man in a suit. The man had come to pick up his car after a quick check and refused to accept Marcus's price, insisting the mechanic's work was unworthy of the fee. The exchange was sharp, a collision of entitlement and quiet dignity. Vanessa stepped in without thinking. "Do you know anything about this work?" she asked the man pointedly. "Because I do, and I'll pay for it if you won't." The man scoffed, surprised to be challenged. "Miss Sterling, surely you understand." "I understand craftsmanship," Vanessa said, cutting him off. And I recognize when someone does a better job than the so-called experts. The suit left stammering. Marcus watched the scene with a look that made her insides warm. Not because she had rescued him, but because she had stood up for him as a person who deserved respect. Something shifted that day. The barrier between their worlds felt a little more permeable. That evening they walked under string lights hung across the garage lot. The air smelled of motor oil and jasmine. Vanessa turned to Marcus, suddenly serious. "You remember the joke?" she asked, fingers finding his. He smiled, but his eyes were steady. "You mean the marriage line?" She nodded. For months it had been a playful nudge between them. Now it felt like a hinge that could open a new door. "I don't know if I can say yes right now," she admitted. "But I don't want the joke to stay a joke forever." Marcus reached up, brushing a streak of grease from her cheek, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't want it to either," he said. "Promises mean something to me. Not flashy words. Simple truths. If we're going to go forward, I need to know it's for real. That you know what you want." Silence stretched, full and tender. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declarations. Just two people, battered a little by life and softened a little by care, deciding that their private joke deserved to become something grounded. "So let's promise," Vanessa said, surprising herself with the ease of it. Not a wedding today. Not even a plan for a wedding, but a promise to try, to make space for each other, to face the messy parts when they come. Marcus's smile widened, and he took her hand in both of his. "That I can do," he said. "A promise, then, to try, to be honest, to show up." They stood there under the soft glow of the lights, hands entwined, both feeling the weight and the warmth of that simple vow. It was a promise with no ring and no fanfare, only the real kind that grows from daily choices. Coffee shared, engines repaired, arguments fought and forgiven. As they walked back to the car together, Vanessa heard her phone buzz with a new email. Another deal, another deadline. She looked at Marcus, then at the road ahead, and felt for the first time in a long time that two worlds could meet without one consuming the other. This was the moment the laugh on the roadside stopped being merely a laugh. It had become a promise, soft, courageous, and quietly revolutionary. The cafe across from Marcus's garage wasn't anything like the high-end coffee spots Vanessa usually visited. No marble counters, no latte art competitions, no customers tapping on sleek laptops. Just a few wooden tables, the smell of fresh-baked bread, and a small chalkboard menu written in messy handwriting. Marcus pushed the door open for her, the little bell above it giving a cheerful ring. They slid into a booth by the window, sunlight spilling across the table. The waitress, a friendly woman in her 50s, greeted Marcus like an old friend. "The usual?" she asked him with a smile. "Make it two," Marcus replied, nodding toward Vanessa. She raised an eyebrow. "You're ordering for me now?" "You like it?" he said simply, leaning back in his seat. When the coffee arrived, strong, steaming, and served in plain ceramic mugs, Vanessa took a cautious sip. The bold, rich flavor surprised her. "Not bad," she admitted. Marcus smirked. "Told you." For a moment, they just sipped in comfortable silence. Vanessa couldn't remember the last time she'd sat across from someone without feeling the pressure to fill every second with small talk. "So," Marcus began, "what's your story?" Vanessa tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You've got a car most people can't even pronounce. You wear shoes that probably cost more than my first truck. And yet you're out here on a dusty road in the middle of nowhere. I'm guessing you're not from around here." She laughed softly. "I'm not. I live in the city. I run Sterling Motors." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "The car company?" "Yeah. My father built it from scratch. When he passed, I took over." Marcus nodded slowly, as if piecing something together. "So you sell cars, but you didn't know what was wrong with yours." "That's one way to put it," she admitted, smiling. "I know business. I know numbers. But engines? That's your territory." "And what about you?" she asked. "You grew up here?" "Born and raised," he said. "My dad opened a garage before I was born. I was turning wrenches before I could ride a bike. Guess I never saw the point in leaving." You never wanted more? He met her gaze steadily. More isn't always better. Sometimes more just means more noise, more stress, more people telling you what you should be doing. I like it here. I can do good work. People trust me. Something about the way he said it struck her. In her world, trust had to be bought or negotiated. Out here, it seemed to be given freely to those who earned it. They talked for over an hour. About cars. About family. About the strange, unspoken pressure of living up to a legacy. Vanessa learned that Marcus had no interest in expanding his garage or chasing fame. He was content in his small corner of the world, fixing the impossible and taking pride in it. Marcus learned that beneath her polished exterior, Vanessa was tired. Tired of corporate politics. Tired of being surrounded by people who only saw her as a title, not a person. At one point, the waitress brought over a slice of pie on the house. Vanessa tried it and laughed. "This is dangerous," she said, taking another bite. "Told you," Marcus said with a grin. "Best pie in the county. You won't find this in your fancy city cafes." She shook her head, smiling. "You might be right." When they finally stepped back outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Vanessa glanced at her car, gleaming in the fading light, then at Marcus. "You know," she said, "I think this is the first real conversation I've had in months." He looked at her with quiet amusement. "That's a little sad." "Maybe, but it's true." They stood there for a moment, the air warm and still. Vanessa didn't want to admit it, but she felt something shifting inside her. When she first met Marcus, he was just a stranger by the roadside, a means to an end. Now, she wasn't so sure. She climbed into her car, starting the engine just to hear that smooth purr again. Marcus leaned on the doorframe, looking down at her. "Drive safe, city girl." She smirked. "See you around, country boy." As she pulled away, she caught his reflection in the mirror, still standing there, watching her go, a small smile on his face. And for the first time in a long time, Vanessa found herself hoping she would see someone again. The air was still. Not a single breeze stirred the long grass by the roadside. Even the cicadas seemed to have gone quiet, as if nature itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus stepped back from the car, wiping his hands on that same rag. His eyes met Vanessa's with calm certainty, not cocky, not unsure. Just steady. "All right," he said quietly, almost like it was a sacred moment. "She's ready." Vanessa hesitated. For all the confidence Marcus radiated, she still remembered the string of disappointments from the past week. The expensive garages, the specialists, the polite but hopeless shakes of the head. She slid into the driver's seat slowly, like she was afraid to break the spell. The leather was warm beneath her palms, the faint scent of her favorite perfume still clinging to the cabin. She placed the key in the ignition. "Here goes nothing," she murmured to herself. Marcus leaned against the fender, arms crossed, his eyes never leaving her. She turned the key. C-H-H-H-K, C-H-H-H-K. For a split second, her heart sank. Then, vroom. The sound that filled the air wasn't just an engine starting. It was a resurrection. Deep, powerful, and impossibly smooth, like the heartbeat of something that had been asleep for too long and had just awakened. Vanessa's eyes widened. Her jaw fell open slightly as she gave the accelerator a gentle press. The engine purred in perfect harmony, each rev smoother than the last. She killed the ignition, climbed out of the car, and stared at him as though he just performed an impossible magic trick. "No way," she breathed. "How did you—" Marcus cut her off with a small shrug. "Like I said, sometimes it's not about replacing parts. It's about understanding them." Vanessa shook her head slowly, a disbelieving smile spreading across her face. "You know, you're making those city mechanics look like amateurs." He chuckled softly. "Different worlds. They work with what they know. I work with what I understand." The words lingered in her mind, what I understand. Vanessa realized he hadn't just fixed her car. He looked at it the way she wished people would look at her. Not as a trophy to be admired or a problem to be dismissed, but as something worth taking the time to really figure out. It was unsettling. In a good way. "You do realize," she said after a beat, That by fixing it, you've technically earned a marriage proposal? He raised an eyebrow, that faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth again. Technically? She laughed. Okay, fine. But I don't marry strangers. Then maybe we shouldn't be strangers. The words were simple, but they carried an ease that made them hard to brush off. She glanced down the road toward the city, then back at him. The logical part of her brain told her she had meetings to prepare for, calls to make, emails to send. But another part, the one that had been quietly aching for something different, told her to stay a little longer. You like coffee? She asked suddenly. Depends, he said. Is it strong? She smiled. Stronger than my car's crankshaft, apparently. Marcus chuckled, motioning toward a small cafe across from his garage. You buying? Of course, she replied. It's the least I can do for my potential future husband. As they crossed the road together, Vanessa glanced back one last time at her car. It sat gleaming in the afternoon light, perfectly repaired, as if it had never been broken at all. But in her gut, she knew this wasn't just the end of her car trouble. This was the start of something much bigger. The smell of warm oil and sun-baked metal hung heavy in the air as Marcus leaned over the open hood. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. Vanessa had seen mechanics work before, fast, rough, and loud. But Marcus was different. There was no rush in his movements, no wasted gestures. Every twist of the wrench, every adjustment, every flick of his wrist seemed deliberate, almost graceful. If the city mechanics had been surgeons, Marcus was more like an artist, except his canvas was a tangle of steel, pistons, and wires. Vanessa found herself watching closely, curious about the way he worked. His hands were large and strong, yet when he gripped a delicate cable, it was with the care of someone holding a bird. He didn't glance at a manual, didn't consult a computer screen, just worked from memory and instinct, as if the engine was speaking to him in a language only he understood. He tapped a part here, tightened a bolt there, then paused, tilting his head like he was listening. Hear that? He asked. Vanessa frowned. Hear what? The silence. He smiled faintly. Exactly. She's quiet now. Means we're getting close. From time to time, he explained what he was doing, not to show off, but simply because it seemed natural to share the process. This valve here, it's sticking. Doesn't need replacing, just needs a little persuasion. Tap, tap, tap. And this connector? Whoever worked on it last didn't align it right. Makes the timing go off. It amazed her how he could diagnose so much just by sight and touch. She had once toured one of her company's assembly plants, where cars were put together by teams of engineers with cutting-edge tools. Marcus was working alone in a small countryside garage, with nothing but a toolbox and the experience in his hands. Yet he was doing what the so-called best in the city couldn't. The sun shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. Vanessa realized she hadn't checked her phone once since he started. Normally, she would have been pacing, sending emails, trying to multitask. But now, she stood still, strangely content just to watch. Marcus wiped his brow with the back of his arm, then crouched lower to inspect something deeper inside the engine. The rhythmic click, twist, click of his tools was oddly satisfying. You're awfully quiet for someone who started this with a marriage proposal, he teased, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. Vanessa smirked. I'm just observing the man who might be my future husband. He chuckled. You say that like I'm auditioning. Aren't you? She said with a playful glint in her eyes. Marcus stood upright, rolling his shoulders. All right, moment of truth, he said, stepping back. Start her up. Vanessa slid into the driver's seat, still doubtful but curious. She turned the key, and the engine roared to life, smooth and strong, as if it had never been broken. Her jaw dropped. What? How? He leaned against a fender, his tone casual. Sometimes parts don't need replacing. They just need to be reminded how to work together. It was such a simple statement, but it carried weight. Vanessa could feel there was a bigger meaning behind it, one she couldn't quite put into words yet. She shut off the car and stepped out, hands on her hips. 3 professional shops in the city told me this was impossible. You made it look easy. Marcus shook his head. Wasn't easy. Just took patience. That's the thing about machines. If you take the time to understand them, they'll tell you what they need. The way he said it, it didn't sound like he was just talking about cars anymore. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Vanessa just watched him, the late sunlight catching the edges of his profile. In the city, she was surrounded by men in polished suits who spoke fast and promised more than they could deliver. Marcus wasn't promising anything. He was proving it. It was the first time in a long time that someone had impressed her without even trying. "Well," she said finally, breaking the silence, "I guess this means you've earned that coffee I offered." Marcus gave a small nod, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Guess I have." As she followed him toward the small roadside cafe across from his garage, she glanced back at her car. It sat gleaming in the fading light, the very picture of perfection. And yet, she knew the real thing worth remembering wasn't the car itself. It was the man who'd brought it back to life. Vanessa had a habit of keeping her problems under control. In the boardroom, she was the one people came to for solutions. In her personal life, she didn't wait for help. She paid for it. But for the past week, this car had been her one unsolved riddle. It wasn't just any car. It was the crown jewel of her collection, a limited edition Urona GDV, imported from Italy, hand-built, and barely 50 models in the entire country. Every inch of it had been engineered for perfection, except, apparently, its stubborn engine. The trouble had started the week before. One moment she was cruising down the coastal highway. The next, the car started coughing like it had caught a bad cold. She'd taken it to the most expensive repair shop in the city, the kind with glass walls and espresso machines in the waiting area. The head mechanic had glanced under the hood for all of 2 minutes before shaking his head. "The crankshaft's damaged. You'll need a replacement, but no one stocks that part here. You'll have to import it. 6 weeks, maybe more." 6 weeks. To Vanessa, 6 weeks without her car felt like a prison sentence. But she wasn't ready to give up. She tried another shop. This one kept the car for 3 days, calling in their specialist. They called her back with the same verdict: unfixable without the part. By the third shop, she could almost predict the words before they were spoken. "It's not worth it to try." So when Marcus leaned under her hood that afternoon, she wasn't hopeful. She'd already been through this routine 3 times. She expected the same sigh, the same shake of the head, and maybe an offer to tow it somewhere else. But Marcus didn't sigh. He didn't even mutter. He just started looking, really looking. He ran his fingers along the edge of the engine block, like a man reading Braille. He tilted his head, listened to something only he could hear. He even closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in, as though the car was speaking to him in a language no one else understood. "Looks like everyone's been blaming the wrong part," he murmured. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And what do you think it is, doctor?" He smirked faintly. "Let's just say your crankshaft isn't the problem. Something upstream's throwing it off. The others were looking at the symptoms, not the cause." It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was the first time anyone had sounded sure. From his toolbox, Marcus pulled out a few basic instruments: a socket wrench, a voltage meter, and a flashlight that had clearly seen better days. No sleek, shiny machines. No computerized diagnostics. Just the kind of tools her grandfather might have used. Vanessa leaned against a fender, arms crossed. "So you're telling me you can fix what 3 high-end garages couldn't?" Marcus's eyes stayed on the engine. "Not telling you. Showing you." The next 20 minutes were a dance. He loosened bolts, adjusted wires, tapped certain parts with the handle of his wrench, as if knocking on a door. He swapped a couple components. Nothing new, just rearranging existing ones. She watched, puzzled. "You're not replacing anything." "Don't need to," he said. "Your parts are fine. They just need to work together again." It struck her how different his approach was. The other shops had all been about replacement, finding new parts, ordering expensive imports. Marcus was about restoration. Finally, he crouched low, fiddling with something she couldn't quite see. There was a click, then a faint humming sound. "There," he said, straightening up. "I think she's ready." Vanessa blinked. "That's it? No drama? No sparks flying?" He chuckled. If sparks are flying, you've already done something wrong. She slid into the driver's seat, still skeptical. The leather was warm from sitting in the sun. Her fingers wrapped around the polished steering wheel as she turned the key. Vroom! The sound hit her like a shockwave. Not the sputtering cough she'd been hearing for a week, but the deep, clean roar she remembered from the day she bought it. Her eyes went wide. She killed the ignition, then started it again. The same perfect growl. She stepped out, staring at him like he'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. That's impossible. Marcus shrugged. Not impossible. Just misunderstood. Vanessa laughed, shaking her head. You know, the guys in the city all acted like they were doing me a favor just by looking at it. You actually fixed it. That's the difference between guessing and knowing, Marcus said simply. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't just about a car. It was about how he saw the world. Problems weren't there to be avoided or passed off to someone else. They were there to be understood piece by piece until they made sense. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet, stubborn determination was exactly what was going to pull her back to this little roadside garage again and again. The road between the city and the countryside was almost empty, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. Vanessa's sleek sports car, now purring smoothly thanks to Marcus's magic touch, looked completely out of place beside the old wooden sign that read Cole's Garage. It's T 1984. She leaned against the hood, sunglasses pushed up on her head, studying the man in front of her. Marcus Cole was not what she expected from a mechanic. No small talk about weather, no pushy offers to check the tires or add a service package. He spoke only when there was something worth saying, his deep voice carrying a calm certainty that somehow made her feel steady. Vanessa came from a world of speed, deadlines, pressure, people who talked fast, walked fast, and rarely listened. Marcus seemed like the complete opposite. A man who moved at his own pace, but somehow still got things done faster than anyone else. You really didn't need to help me, she said, her tone a mix of gratitude and curiosity. I didn't exactly offer a serious payment. Marcus's lips curved into a small smile. Didn't do it for the payment. Vanessa tilted her head. Then why? He shrugged, wiping his hands on that same old rag. Because it's what I do. People bring me broken things. I fix them. Simple as that. Simple. The word felt almost foreign to her, in her world. Nothing was simple. Everything was tied to strategy, image, and negotiation. She crossed her arms. And if you hadn't been able to fix it, then I have tried something else until I could. The answer made her chuckle, though she wasn't sure why. They stood there for a moment, just taking each other in, two strangers from completely different universes. Vanessa, in her tailored dress and designer shoes, the picture of corporate success. Marcus, in his oil-stained overalls and worn work boots, the picture of someone who earned everything with his hands. It wasn't just their appearances that were different. It was their rhythm. She was used to conversations that felt like battles. He spoke like a man who'd already made peace with the world. But the biggest difference? She realized she didn't feel the need to impress him. How long have you had this place? She asked, glancing at the small workshop behind him. The sign looked old, but the tools inside seemed well cared for. My dad opened it before I was born, Marcus said. I grew up here. Learned everything I know right in that garage. And you stayed? Never thought of moving somewhere bigger? He looked toward the horizon before answering. Sometimes bigger just means more noise. I like knowing the people I help. I like having time to do the job right. His words settled into her like a truth she hadn't considered before. A gust of wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of motor oil and summer dust. Somewhere down the road, a cicada droned lazily. The whole scene felt slower, warmer, more human than anything Vanessa had experienced in months. And yet, the thought crept in, we'll probably never see each other again. It was just a passing encounter, a small story she might tell at a dinner party one day. Oh, once a country mechanic fixed my impossible car. But as she looked at Marcus, really looked at him, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story at all. Marcus broke the silence. Where were you headed, anyway? You look like you were in a hurry." Vanessa laughed softly. "I'm always in a hurry. Meetings, deals, the usual corporate chaos." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why your car broke down. Sometimes things stop working when you push them too hard." She raised an eyebrow. "Are we still talking about the car?" He gave that quiet, knowing smile again, but didn't answer. When she finally slid into the driver's seat, she hesitated before closing the door. "You know, you're different from anyone I've met in a long time." Marcus leaned an elbow on the hood, tilting his head. "Is that good different or bad different?" She smiled faintly. "I haven't decided yet." "Then I guess we'll have to meet again so you can figure out." It wasn't a flirtatious line, not exactly, but there was something about the way he said it that made her pulse skip. As she drove away, the mirror showed Marcus still standing by the roadside, hands in his pockets, watching her go. Not like a man regretting her departure, but like a man who already knew they'd cross paths again. And deep down, Vanessa suspected he was right.